So, in the news this week, there's a really interesting story circling around here in Minnesota where I reside. And I would say a story, stroke argument, stroke discussion, stroke debate. And it's all around removing school resource officers from the public schools. And the reason is that there was a recent change of law in relation to restraints. And I want to talk it through with you. But first, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what the discussion is about. So police officers have had limitations placed on the physical restraints that can be used on students in schools, public schools, which has meant that at least 10 police departments here have pulled out of the school system due to these restraints. And we can see on the bottom here that it says, very interestingly, that it's restraining students in a way that impacts their ability to breathe or their voice. Now, there's some things that I can say as a Black Englishman living in America, and one of them is that this is living in a post-George Floyd era, without a doubt. I'm not saying that all police officers are angels. I served for 14 years as a detective in England, as many of you know. There are many, many, many good police officers out there. The bad ones are in the minority for sure. But it's really interesting for me as a Black man that they use the term the ability to breathe or voice. We're living in a very much post-George Floyd era where our law enforcement are under attack. The other thing which is interesting about this is that the confusion swirls, and they say in here that it's literally over like 2 words that have been changed. But everyone is unclear surrounding what can and what can't they do, and they've got different interpretations. And right now, the police departments are waiting for more guidance on it. So that is the basis of the law change in how they can restrain school children. And I want to play a short video first, and then I'll come back and discuss it a bit more. So let's go to this video.
Today, kids went back to school, and they're less safe this year than they were last year.
Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher joins the growing number of law enforcement agencies in Minnesota pulling school resource officers.
You know, the primary issue is that officers need the flexibility to restrain a person on the ground.
Ramsey County had 6 SROs in schools, pulling all of them for what Fletcher says are liability issues. The SROs served several schools in the county, including the Mounds View Public School District and 3 alternative schools in Little Canada.
We're going to see increases in disorderly behavior because those officers are no longer there all the time.
So you see the value in SROs, so why take them out of those schools?
We can't have the risk of one of our officers being accused of a crime for doing his job. We train them to use prone restraint.
There is an interpretation that the Attorney General has talked about where it is lawful if there could be danger of death or bodily harm.
The problem is things don't start out being a danger of bodily harm or death. They escalate over time.
Sheriff Fletcher is joining the calls for Governor Walz to hold a special session to clarify the law.
The public expects that issues this big, this important to their children is going to have a full discussion with law enforcement input.
As for now, Fletcher says his deputies who worked as SROs will spend 75% of their time at schools, but will have other duties.
So a couple of quick things then. So we have become used to having school resource officers inside our schools to help with many different facets around risk management. So I think us as parents have become used to having them in the schools. So particularly in Minnesota right now, there's a lot of, like I said, heated debate, discussion, whatever you want to call it, about this. Sheriff Fletcher said a couple of interesting things in there. And one was the increase in disorderly behavior in schools by not having the school resource officers. And it's really interesting because one of the newsreels that I saw, and I was struggling to find it, there was, I don't know if activist is a strong word, but there was a person who is regularly on the news who seems to like engaging in polarizing statements and very anti-police. And she was talking about well, if there's a kid inside the break room and they're throwing trays around and they're throwing chairs around, why do the police need to intervene anyway? Why do the police need to restrain that person? And I was a little bit sort of taken back by her comment, and perhaps it's because we've swung so far in one direction that as a parent of two boys that are, I like to say, well behaved and are being educated in the right way to live in society, I don't really want my sons to be around people that are throwing things inside the lunchroom, throwing food around, throwing trays around, throwing chairs around without some type of intervention. Why on earth would I want my sons to be in a world where that behavior is considered to be normal and we ignore that behavior? So to a degree, I fully agree with what he says, that without an authoritative presence, there is going to be an increase in disorderly behavior, because we're not talking about the kids that are well behaved, the kids that know right from wrong, the kids that have moral compass, and the kids that have parents that keep them in check and say, this is how we're going to live our lives, this is how I expect you to live your life. We're talking about that minority that don't live by the same moral code as others, or perhaps they have behavioral issues. And I fully accept people might have behavior issues, they might have mental illness. However, I don't really want my son to live in a world where people think it's normal to throw tables and chairs around and everyone says, well, that's okay, that's just Simon, just leave him, he'll calm down. And the other 60 people in around it have to be fearful, intimidated, and wait for this behavior to change. So that was one interesting thing that he said. The second one was about police officers are trained to use prone restraints. And again, this is a challenging one because, as I mentioned earlier, living in the post-George Floyd era, we do live in a world where police restraints have definitely been more challenged than they ever have done before. And as I mentioned, are there racist police officers in this world? Yes. Are there police officers that take their restraints way, way too far, more than they ever need to do? Well, the answer is yes. But again, these people are in the minority. We are training police officers to engage in very difficult and challenging situations and use restraint. So it does seem to be very unusual that we're trying to limit how they might respond or act in a certain circumstance, as opposed to if they come across someone in the streets or in a bar on a Friday night and they're disorderly, they're aggressive, they're going to use restraints. And I accept, of course, that we're talking about children now, children in the school system, but if they're showing the same level of violence and aggression, do we not want our police officers to be restraining these individuals in some way to, again, protect people like my two sons that don't live by that code? So a really interesting debate which is going on. I don't think this debate is going to end any time soon. But like I said, it's all around the use of restraint, and the school resource officers are pulling out of the schools. And as I said, we have got very used to having school resource officers to deal with challenging situations. So the fact that they're pulling out, I think there's at least 10 different police departments that have pulled out of the school system. It's going to take a while to unwind this, but I've shared some of my views. The issue is around police officers not being allowed to restrain like they once were in our school system. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? Do you agree with what I've said, or you disagree? My stance very much is that I want my sons to be protected from individuals that might be aggressive or displaying that behavior. I disagree with the activist that I saw on the TV this week where she was saying, let the child do that and no one needs to restrain that child. Well, I don't believe that is actually true, because we're demonstrating and showing the wrong message for those kids that don't behave like that, where you can do these things and get away with it. And it comes a little bit down to what Bob Fletcher said as his first one, is that this is more than likely going to increase disorderly behavior, because those individuals that are aggressive, that assert themselves in situations, the bullies, if you like, they're going to see that there's no one there any longer to act as an authority figure. So love to hear your views and opinions on it. I'll post a link to one of the articles below. But that is what is in the news this week, the debate of the school resource officers pulling out in Minnesota. rages on, and I don't think it's going to be resolved anytime soon. So would love to get your views and opinions on what I've shared, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.